Awesome. Hello, my name is Dhruv, and today I have the privilege of being here with Nimesh Patel. Nimesh, it's so great to have you. Um, yeah, so you've been on the Fast and Loose tour since September. You know, you started in London. You've been working your way across the U.S., especially
Mhm.
the West Coast. So how has this tour been going? Like, how's it been different from your previous tours?
Well, this is a theater tour, so I've been doing a lot bigger venues. It's been interesting in the sense of developing the act. You know, it's a lot harder to write on stage when you have just one show in the city to work stuff out. But it's been fun overall. I really like the new hour that I've put together. I think it's very different than the stuff I've done previously. It's a lot sillier. It's a lot more um, what I enjoy the most about comedy, which is just like being um, nonsensical and goofy. So yeah, it's been fun for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And like, I saw recently on your social media, you got heckled by a certain gentleman in San Francisco, for
Uh-huh.
which I apologize as a Bay Area native. But is the kind of the audience response something that kind of varies regionally? Like, how would you describe touring the different parts of the U.S.?
That was uh, uh, that was a huge anomaly in the sense of even for the Bay, it was just like so strange to have that happen because it was super early on in the show and the guy was like too aggressive um, for what I had said and how he reacted. Um, regionally, like most places are pretty much the same. I think I can get a larger sense of people's politics and internal machinations. Like the crowd in St. Louis was very different than the crowd in Chicago, even though they're only like a few hours apart. The crowds in St. Louis were very different than the crowds in San Francisco for sure, politically and the stuff I said. But it's also hard to discount how much of it was a function of um, how I was feeling and how I was, excuse me, how I was on stage. But
Gotcha.
for the most part, but overall, like people have been very receptive and had a great time. Um, San Francisco was just like that guy was just such a strange um, like such a strange thing to have happen. And I pride myself on the ability to recognize that that guy was going to be a problem for the entire show. And if I was literally like, you know, 5 minutes into the set when I said, if you like Vivek Ramaswamy, it's probably because you have a small dick. And that guy just went off the rails like immediately when I had just said something so off the cuff and flippant that I didn't think it would elicit such a visceral response from that guy.
Yeah, maybe hit a little close to home.
That's exactly right.
Does that like sort of if you when you're heckled, obviously you said it's kind of an anomaly, but does that throw your rhythm off at all when you're doing a set like that?
No, it didn't mm, put me off in any way. It was just I've been doing comedy for a long time, and what's it called? If anything, it was just like I recognized right away that he was going to be a problem, and I think some people commented on the clip like, "Oh, why would you kick this guy out? You have thin skin or whatever." And it was just like, no, I just knew right away that I didn't want some guy that with that kind of entitlement in the show. It didn't bother me that he reacted the way he did by saying, "Show me your dick" or whatever it was. It was more when he said, "I paid for this, make me laugh." That I don't care for. That bothered me in a way where it spoke to people's entitlement overall and like thinking that if someone paid for something that they're owed something beyond what I'm willing to give, and that's why I was like, you got to get the fuck out because he was going to be a problem the entire show. Um, so anyway, I'm gotten away from the question. regionally, most people have been fairly similar. I think like some is a function of like the day of the show, the night of the show, how I'm feeling. But for the most part, people have had a good time.
Yeah, totally. It sure looks like it. And like I know that you're like based in New York. That's where you perform the most when you're not touring. What do you think kind of separates New York as kind of like this like comedy mecca?
Uh, I think I think New York has a reputation for um, being a comedy mecca, and I think that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost a lot of times, where it's just like, oh, we're good savvy comedy audiences. We must be good comedy savvy audiences. But I also think it's the diversity of opinion and the diversity of people that are in New York. Everyone from every walk of life is in New York City, and comedy is so baked into day to day New York existence. Not even from a stand up perspective, but just like you have to be able to laugh to live in New York City because some goofy shit will happen to you like every day. And if you don't learn to laugh at it, then you will turn into a curmudgeon, or the city will chew you out and spit you out unless you learn to laugh at like that homeless guy that bothers you every day or says some stupid shit to you every day, or that entitled person that won't give up their seat on the subway, or person smoking a cigarette on the subway platform. Like everything is funny in New York if you let it be, and I think that's what makes New York such a great place for comedy. Like you have to be able to laugh to survive here.
Very true. Yeah. And like like you're traveling a lot as a part of the tour, obviously. I mean, this past weekend you were in like Sacramento, now you're going to Philly tomorrow. Do you have any like rituals or like a routine that you try to stick to when you're on the road?
I'm going to Philly on the 28th, but what's it called? Routine wise, like I try to fashion myself like LeBron James. You got to have a routine that involves working out, clearing your head, getting a nap in, um, reading, writing. Like it's almost in that order. Get up, get coffee, think about things for a little bit, sit down to write or read, and then flip those, hit the gym, take a nap, shower, get to the show, do sound check, make sure I'm there for sound check, spend the hour between sound check and doors opening, writing the set out, and then the show happens. And then I'm after the show, if I have time, or if I'm in the right headspace after the meet and greet, I will review the set in my head a little bit, maybe write a little bit, go to bed, and rinse and repeat.
Gosh. And
Excuse me.
no, you're all good. And I've noticed that you like to go like while you're touring, you still like to go to like comedy clubs and stuff like that to work on the material. What's kind of the benefit slash like rationale behind doing that?
It's just I have an addiction, and I like to feed it. And luckily, my addiction is just me getting on stage, and not anything worse than that. And really, that's it. It's more just like I like being on stage. It's probably like one of the few times I experience joy. And it's also like comedy for me is such an iterative process. Comedy in general is such an iterative process that the more often you get your reps in, the better. And it's that one time where you didn't want to go on stage, but you did, and you worked on a bit that you didn't know you wanted to work on. That something magical happened, and by magical I mean like a new joke came to your head, or you said something funny that you hadn't said before. So yeah, that's really the logic behind it. Is it's an iterative thing, and the more times you iterate, this diminishing returns happen like very, 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 very late on in the iteration process. Right now, I'm still in the well, there's good value in getting up as often as I can.
And are you still like writing and trying new jokes while you're on tour?
Constantly, every day, every time I'm on stage.
And like when you're putting together like like your hour, your set list, like how much thought are you putting into sequencing? Like how many different iterations of your set will you try before you decide on the one for the special?
A lot of thought goes into it. Um, uh, uh, like right now for the garden specifically, my parents are going to be at the show. My entire family's coming to the show, and um, there's a lot of jokes about them, and that are from experiences that we've had together. And like, I would be not foolish, but I want to make sure that they know that I'm like eternally grateful for all the support that they've given. And so the set right now is structured that they know that right away. When I get on stage, I'm not leaving all this family stuff for the end of the set.
Mhm.
And so like while like the garden has been like in my head like the biggest show for me. And so up until the garden, like I've been pretending that I've been at the garden and structuring it such that like I had before, like when I started the tour, I had uh, put all the stuff about them towards the end, just because like it was not the best stuff, but then I forced myself to work on it and put it up at the top so that like when it's ready for the at the garden, like it's polished and proper, and it starts the show with that energy of like this is a family affair. Um, so yeah, a lot of thought and sequencing goes into it, and it's also like I still want to make sure that the set is cohesive, that it flows without being um, too wonky. But then I listen to other specials, and like, oh, there's no real through line through all of this. There's no real connective tissue, and people don't seem to care, and it's actually still very, very funny. So I'm not like super married to the idea of it being fully structured and all that. That's half the reason the tour is called Fast and Loose, is because I'm all over the place with the set. Like some days I'll start with the closer, and other days I'll start in the middle and figure out if I can go someplace or another. But loosely, like it's like let me shout the family out first, and then go from there.
Gotcha. Awesome. And do you have like before you go on stage, like do you have any like superstitions, like stuff that you do?
I'll stretch. Like I'll do a touch my toes stretch just because I think helps blood go to the brain. um, uh, I'll make sure I write my set out. I'll make sure I have some tea. I'll make sure I do my vocal exercises so that I can talk clearly. But beyond that, no, there's no like superstitions. I don't eat before a show. I don't know if that's a superstition or if it's just like everyone knows you don't want to have a full stomach before you get on stage, because then on the off chance something happens in your stomach, you don't want that to play out uh, um, while you're on the stage.
Yeah, yeah, maybe not. Yeah, so like you've talked about it a little bit. Like, how would you kind of describe your writing process? Like, are you writing out your jokes verbatim? Like, are you setting aside time every day?
Some jokes are verbatim, other jokes I got a beginning and an end, and then I can fill in the middle on stage.
Mhm.
It really depends on the bit, um, but I've found that usually the ones where I write them out, they tend to do better. But those are also the ones that I want to make sure like they're really detail oriented and all that. Some jokes I'm just like, oh, I just remember it in my head. Most of the jokes are just in my head. Um, it's usually like the longer bits that I got to write out and make sure that they flow some way.
And like, how many times do you have to do a joke before you're confident enough to like put it into your act?
I don't know. Really depends. A lot of jokes I know right away are gonna be in the set, and a lot of jokes I know right away won't make the set. It's just a matter of it's joke to joke. But some jokes I'm like I really want to make this work, and I got to keep it in the set, so I'll keep iterating on it until it's where it needs to be. And other jokes I'm like I know the instant I say it, like I don't really care about this joke. but it'll fill some space until I can replace it.
And you grew up in Irvington, which is a place where you joke that the Blood and Crip gang put aside their
No, no,
differences to rob your
I,
father.
I did not
Uh,
grow up in Irvington. I grew up in
okay,
Parsippany. Irvington
gotcha,
is where my dad's second store was. His first store
gotcha.
was in East Orange, New Jersey. And then that store, he relinquished that store probably in '07 or '08. And then he had a store in Irvington from, I want to say '07 until, I can't even tell you when, until he had a gun put to his head. And then that store was um, out of our that was after that, and let go of that store, and then we still own it, but he no longer works there.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you joke about it now, but did you kind of have like a sense of humor about what was going on in your life when you were growing up?
No, I did not know. Um, the, it didn't seem abnormal to me um, that someone would have a store, and that it would sometimes it would be life and limb sometimes. I guess I'd never really fully processed it as a child, that that's what was going on. It just seemed like, okay, this is the thing. This is how the world works sometimes. Um, if anything, I was angry about it, um, because it took so much time away from spending time with my dad. Like he was always working, and that was more angering than it was funny.
You do you remember like that first? I think your first experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. At the Stress Factory in
Mhm.
Jersey. What was that kind of experience like? And do you think I'm obligated to ask this? Do you think your NYU education was applicable at all to what you were doing?
Stress Factory was awesome. My all my cousins came out, um, and they rallied around me, and they made sure that I did well enough that it was something I would continue to pursue. Um, in regards to NYU, you know, I was pre-med and I was finance at NYU, and I had no idea I wanted to do comedy until a year after I graduated with a degree in finance, that wasn't being put to use. Um, I'm sure there are lessons I could glean from my days studying, DCF models, that would be applicable to something in comedy. Um, but uh, short answer is no. I wish I had known that comedy is something I wanted to do, because I would have, you know, done a lot more classes in Tisch than I did in CAS. Like I would have dropped pre-med a lot earlier and made all my electives Tisch classes, Tisch writing classes. But again, that's all hindsight. What I don't, that's not to say I regret going to NYU. Like all my floor mates from Reuben are still some of my closest friends. Some of them were groomsmen at my wedding and all that kind of stuff. So NYU did have that impact on me, in the sense of like am a New Yorker. Can call myself one. I spent since '04 in New York, and granted, it wasn't a full college experience, but it was a very New York experience. And then number two, like my friends are still my NYU friends are still some of my closest friends. So um, uh, uh, that is applicable. And those friends were the friends that came out to Bringer shows when I started comedy in New York City. Like, hey, I'm doing 5 minutes at Gotham. I need 10 people to come out. Please come, and they would be there. So
I'm sure the no AC of Reuben Hall really helped bring people together.
that was yeah. I think I blacked that out. Yeah. Shout out
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Have to do it. You said like when you first started out, Chris Rock is obviously someone who's had a big influence on you, and you said you were basically doing like a Chris Rock impression. How long
Mhm.
did it take you to kind of find your comedic voice, and how would you kind of describe your style now?
I'm still, chasing a voice. I think I shook the Chris Rock thing pretty early, from a mannerisms perspective. I don't think I should, nor will I shake trying to view the world the way Chris does, and the way that a lot of other comedians do, which is slightly askew and, with the point of view of like we're all just people. Yeah, I think it's taken a while to distill my own point of view, and it's kind of evolved. Um, uh, uh, but I think like as I'm, entering my 15 year of doing stand up, like I can say like I have a fairly distinct voice, which is probably an amalgamation of all the influences that I've had, over the years, whether it be Chris or Mitch Hedberg, Chappelle, Patrice, and whoever else.
Totally. And like and stand-up is obviously like it's like at its essence it's kind of like a lonely craft, you're like writing alone, you're going to open mics when you first start out alone, you leave the clubs, you go back home alone. But I've heard that you attribute a lot of the success that you had as being friends early on with like up and comers like Michael Che and Mike Denny. So what do you like, how much do you think being a part of a group like that contributed to your initial success?
I think, well, Che and Denny, we ran a show together, and that was, from 2011 to 2018 or so. Um, and we weren't a group necessarily. It was just like we had a show together, and Denny saw something in myself and saw something in Che that he asked us both to like, start a show with him, and we liked the opportunity to create our own stage time. And through that and through open mics, I made a lot of friends who are now, hyper successful in their fields. The Lucas brothers, Kevin Barnett, may he rest in peace. Like a lot of people who I would call close friends and hang out with outside of just comedy, who were instrumental indirectly in my success and everyone else's success, in the sense that it made us feel like, oh shit, like we're all, you would see like the Lucas Bros and Kevin and Rabinowitz and other people get like a TV show. I'm like, oh shit, that's within the realm of possibility for me. Like I was just on stage with this guy. Like when Che got Letterman, it was like, holy shit, you can get Letterman. Like it was like crazy, and so it was inspirational in that sense. And I I like I do not discount by uh any number like the psychological support that seeing peers succeed gave. You can look at it, if you're an asshole, like, oh man, I didn't get this thing that they got. But for me, it felt like whenever someone got something, it felt like it made it more real for myself, that it's something that could be achieved. And so shout out to all my peers, who have been inspirations in that regard.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like, and you're on Verified Stand Up on Netflix, that came out recently, and you say as part of your set that you're doing jokes that they rejected 5 years prior.
Mhm.
SNL, first Indian writer, but then you ended up your tenure with the show was kind of short. You got booted off stage at Columbia. Like, how are you able to take these kind of like hurdles, like these moments of adversity, and kind of like persevere through them?
Well, in the moment, they feel pretty bad, you know, um, but as as they accumulate, you kind of, learn to remind yourself, you know, all things must pass, and at some point, it becomes there's literally nothing else to do but keep going. Like, what am I going to quit stand up? You know what I mean? Like, I literally have nothing else I can do. I don't have any other skills now. I haven't cultivated anything else. And so that abject reality combined with the idea that knowing that, you know, all the things that I've gone through, um, I've I've survived them. Um, Ultimately, that's what kind of keeps you going. And coupled with the fact, you know, I very much believe in myself and know that I'm gonna pursue and persist.
Did you always have that self-belief? Like, was there any moment of doubt when you were first starting out?
No, that's the answer to your second question. I you know I entered comedy with the arrogance of someone who had no idea what an uphill battle it would be, and I also entered comedy with the arrogance of uh, a kid that went to NYU. I consider myself pretty smart at the time, and I really thought, how hard could this be? Um, Granted, it's like the hardest thing ever, yeah, as you learn, but um, at the time, it was, I can do this, I can achieve, I have to, you know, like look at all my peers who are not comedians. They're all super successful. They're all doctors or financiers, and they're all killing it and doing great for the most part. It's like, well, these are my peers in life, and um, therefore I too shall be able to do something. And I also think I'm good at what I do, and that I would be good at anything that I did if I pursued it. And so that's kind of that quiet, that arrogance has turned to confidence. At the time I started, I had no uh, right to be feeling the way I was feeling about myself. Um, and not that's not to say my ego was not checked constantly. Comedy is a constant ego check. But again, like if you don't believe in yourself, then this is not a game for you because you will be beat up constantly um, at every step of the way.
Definitely. And talking about kind of the steps on that journey was securing Madison Square Garden, which is a huge milestone. Congratulations. Has
Thank
that
you.
been the proudest moment of your career so far? And if not, what is?
I think some of the most proud moments, you kind of, they're not really the big ones that like, oh yeah, you did Madison Square Garden. I'm doing Madison Square Garden. I'm a sold out Chicago theater. You know, I did two shows at Warner Theater, all that. That's all great, and I'm very grateful that I got to do all those things. That I get to you know perform at like historic venues and people show love and support and all that. The proud moments are like you know when your mom texts you that her coworker is a fan, or that someone comes into the store where my dad works and tells him about a comedian, and then my dad gets to say, "Oh, yeah, that's my son." Like that you know that's hard to compare to like selling 3,000 tickets, but to me, like my parents being happy that someone like my parents being feeling famous is a very cool thing. Um, you know, like I'm not sure how you grow up or whatever, but liquor store owners are not exactly high up in the Indian social hierarchy when it comes to conversation and who's respected or whatever. But uh, a liquor store owner's son became the first Indian American to ever write on Saturday Night Live. So um, you can hang that's a cool thing to know. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like not bad for a guy with no college education. He raised a kid that was the first Indian to ever write on Saturday Night Live, the first Patel to hold court at Madison Square Garden, the first, you know, whatever it is. You know. Those are the proud moments. And then of course, you know, Chris Rock telling me I'm funny will probably be the highlight of my life. Um, and that was in 2015, so it's been downhill since. But
Yeah. So kind of switching gears a little bit, like talking about the state of comedy now. A lot of comedians, especially stand-ups, like they have their own podcast now that they're doing concurrent to their stand-up work. So I wanted to get your thoughts on like what do you think about the podcasting format and how it's affected the way comedy is consumed? Is that ever a medium that you could see yourself
Um, I think podcasting is great. I think it's provided a lot of platforms for people that would otherwise not be able to do stand up and but still want to talk and be funny. Um, I think it's a great additive thing for a lot of my peers, and if not, it's surpassed their stand up careers and helped them grow their stand up careers. I wish I could um, dedicate the time to create one and get one going for real. It's just a lot of work, but I do see the value in it from a writing perspective. It helps you definitely ideate and get stuff out there. Right now, I just don't have the bandwidth. I've got like 5 more minutes before I
with?
got to
Okay,
pop, but yeah,
no worries. I got one question left, so this is perfect.
sure.
Um, yeah, so you've written for the Oscars, SNL, obviously. You worked on Samantha Bee, written for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You've been a touring stand-up for a number of years. Is there any kind of desire, like what is next for you in your career? Is there any desire to return to kind of like sketch narrative format?
Um, I'm 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 very excited to see what happens after I stop touring in May. I'm going to stop touring in May for at least 6 months, if not a year. And we'll see what happens after that. I think it's time to flex some other muscles and uh, see what else I can do creatively. It's a stand up is a very freeing platform, but it's also stand up. At least for me, there's only so much more I can do in stand up from a creative perspective, like how I can change it up. That it's like time to like rest and do something else for a little while. Um, so yeah, I'm looking forward to that, but I'm also like very happy that I get to do this part of it, create an hour out of nothing, and really hopefully bring joy to some people.
Yeah, and I mean you can and you're doing a fantastic job of it, I must say.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can catch Nimesh on the Fast and Loose tour at Madison Square Garden on December 30th, or at
Yes,
any upcoming locations on Ticketmaster. Nimesh, thank you again for taking the time to talk with me today, and I wish you nothing but the best for
of
the
course, man.
tour.
Thank